Hey, good morning, folks. Welcome again to another YouTube with Y2K. So today, let's just double check. The date is the 12th of May, Tuesday, and it's 7:51 a.m. and you join me on the way to work. So I thought today we're going to do a little bit different in terms of content, and one of the key things that's been raised as a public concern. Okay, now I wouldn't know if it will be fully a public concern or is it more of a government concern. But recently, the government in Singapore has been saying that fertility rates in Singapore are dipping. It's dropping, it's declining in the last number of years, and perhaps for 2026 or late 2025 or in the whole year of 2025 and 2026. As you're not fully through 2026, it's still like almost to the midway, coming up to June of 2026. So fertility rates have been low. So I'm just going to play a snippet of the second Minister of Law. So it's Miss Indrani Raja. She talks about how she's planning for, well, I guess she's proposing, for so-called like a marriage and parenthood reset. So I'm just gonna play it. If you guys can hear it, we'll just listen to together. If not, you guys can Google about it, Indrani Raja, and you can Google Indrani Raja fertility. Yeah.
What we need is a marriage and parenthood reset. Trying to raise our TFR has always been a priority, but with the latest figures, this has acquired a new urgency. The government is wholly committed to addressing this issue head on, and we will spare no effort to arrest and reverse this decline. However, it cannot be the work of government alone. We need all of society to play their part. What we need is a marriage and parenthood reset, by which I mean a reset across society on the following. First, how marriage and parenthood are viewed and supported. Second, how workplaces can evolve to better align work and family. And third, how everyone can play their part. To achieve this, we will form a new work group with the relevant agencies to look into these issues holistically and engage widely across members of the public, businesses, and the people sector. I will chair this work group and will share more details in due course. But for now, let me set out the broad four-pronged approach that we will take. First, we will build on current efforts to enhance government support for marriage and parenthood. Second, we will cultivate positive mindsets about marriage and parenthood. Third, we will work with employers to foster workplace cultures and practices that are family friendly. And fourth, we will engage the whole of society in this effort.
So what you guys basically heard was basically the second Minister of Law, Miss Indrani Raja. She was sharing about how she's got a plan. Keyword is marriage and parenthood reset. So the 4 points, we're just going to quickly summarize, is they're going to engage society on a whole level. They change the way people think about family and having children, as well as engage the workplace to make employers more inclusive towards parenthood and all these things, as well as government support. Well, I'm assuming the word support means support for finances, education, subsidies, maybe healthcare and stuff like that. But overall, if you ask me, right, the key problem about fertility, well, I don't think it's just fertility that's dropping in Singapore, but probably across some Southeast Asian countries, or maybe in Asian countries that are somewhat above the developing mark. Okay, so developing mark maybe, for example, you're looking at countries like Cambodia, Myanmar, and maybe what's the other country? Thailand, Vietnam, and all this. So there are aspects in those countries, Southeast Asian countries, that are also still developing. So they aren't fully like urbanized fully because they still have a lot of agriculture infrastructure, and they have a lot of people who are still, doing agricultural, as well as less on the corporate. When I say corporate, it's more like less on the bankings and all that, which Singapore has a lot. And so the question becomes, you have a first world country like Singapore, but yeah, let's come back to Singapore. You have a first world country like Singapore, really good in its currency. The Singapore dollar has been high for some time, but you also have to consider the fact is that when I always talk to people, I've always said that childhood children in Singapore, or having a child. Okay, so excuse the words about childhood, but I think I'll come to childhood later. Having a child in Singapore is not a 2-year phone plan contract, which Singapore has this 2-year phone plan contract, or 10-year car ownership entitlement certificate called the COE, which Singapore has. Ridiculous. It's a ridiculous kind of thing, though. Personally, just I would say about the COE, but let's not talk about that this time around. Focusing on fertility wise, having a child is for life. And of course, in today's day, in today's family, it's very difficult to simply have one spouse working, because couples are thinking about contingency, emergency situations. What if one falls sick and the other one has to pick up the slack and be the sole breadwinner? Back in the 80s, maybe back in the 50s till the 90s, there were more housewives, or maybe house husbands, to be fair. Yes? So one spouse was working, the other one was at home taking care of the housework, the cooking, the grocery shopping, everything else house related, raising the kids when they come back from school. Now, move on to present day. You have couples who are now both husband and wife working, or both spouses working, and they have to think about trying to get better lifestyles, because right now, in my previous videos, when I used to do videos here, I did talk about the 5 C's. So even in a modernized and first world country like Singapore, Singaporeans do have that hope that they can achieve the Singaporean dream, which is the 5 C's. Now, just to reiterate the 5 C's: car, condo, credit card, cash, and country club. Though country clubs are these days so-called dying out here in Singapore, but it doesn't stop people from wishing and hoping for better livelihoods, better luxuries in life, everything to be better. And the thing is that when young couples, you can call them Gen Zs, you can call them Gen X, or millennials, think about children. Sometimes when we look back in the past, the boomer generation, or the post-war generation, which is the Second World War, the post-Second War, in Asian families, they have many children, maybe about 8 children, some have 10. Of course, some people, when they look back in the past, they're like, oh, how come, they can get like 8 kids, or why can they get 10 kids? Do remember the fact is that things are different now. As with even currencies, the cost of inflation. So the thing about even when what the minister Indrani is talking about, that parenthood reset, while the government can talk about support and all these things, the support is only, if I'm not wrong, right, that support is only for quite a brief, like they used to have it when the kid was born. When your child was born, you would get like a bursary support, and then there are supports whereby you get, like, I think, baby bonuses and stuff like that from the government. Now, what are they exactly? I don't know because I don't remember, but they do change over time. But I think with this new plan that Ms. Indrani is proposing, I think they're going to revamp the bursaries and the support for young parents. So the key part of it is that even if you do consider having children, it's not a wrong thing. It's just you need to be very mindful of the expenses, the dollars and cents. Yes, the dollars and cents do count. What do you need to consider? All right. First thing, healthcare. Not just for yourself, but for your children and for some of you, for your elderly parents too. So if you're living in a very nuclear household, okay, with multiple generations all in it, you have you and your wife or you and your husband, and then you also have to consider that you also have to cover your own children when you get kids, and then you also have your elderly parents as well. So there's a lot to consider about the dollars, and everything multiplies up. Now you have three separate groups: your parents, your aging elderly parents, yourselves, and your kids. That's three groups. Now, if obviously your kids can't be working at that point because they're still growing up. Now, your parents could be retired. So that means the sole income of the entire household is going to be coming from the breadwinners, which is the young couple who just have had kids, and they now have to take care of the elderly parents. Unfortunately, this might be the situation for some families. I use the word some, not all. Some families that they have to take care of all three groups: elderly parents, themselves, and their kids. So the financial strain itself is already multiplied by 3 times. Healthcare, insurance, all right, which all parties will need healthcare, and you need insurance as well. Simultaneously, you also need to consider that your kids will have to go to school, which means education fees. Now, even though education is subsidized here, it's the forthcoming education, such as the university fees, private education fees, maybe tuition. Well, Singaporean parents do love to give their kids a lot of enrichment programs: ballet classes, violin classes, Kumon mathematics, or um, there's one Chinese company that's called Tianxia, which means under the sky. It's called Under the Sky. Tianxia Chinese. So they do all of these programs, enrichment programs. So if the more kids you have, it's multiply, multiply, multiply. Now, for shits and giggles, I had a colleague of mine who said, "Oh, I'm going to have 10 children." I said to him, "You must be mad." Yes, because imagine if you want to travel to a country for holiday, basically now, everything, it's times 10. Okay, even you have 4 kids, 3 kids, 2 kids, everything is times 2, times 3, times 4. Now, obviously, you're listening to me at this point, and I'm rambling, sorry, but do consider the fact is that some people might say, "Oh, you're anti fertility." I'm not anti fertility, but the problem that you have here is the economics of sustenance. The economics of sustenance for a family is not cheap, right? That's the reality. It's not simply trying to make things up. The reality of subsistence or sustaining a family in Singapore is very, very expensive. Now, let's obviously, for those who stay in like um, Tokyo, or maybe you're in New York, or you're in big cities, all right, you might be dealing with things a bit different, but do consider over time that it's expensive to have children, all right? Now, I will just re-emphasize, I'm not against people having children. It's just that when I find and I experience and I hear about parents on the street these days, in the supermarkets, in the shops, or in the restaurants, I find that their behavior is quite laissez-faire. It's so laid back to the point that they don't really do a lot of raising. When I say raising, they either just simply put the child there, take the tablet or take the mobile phone, the smartphone, just put it there, put some cartoon on. Back in my day, we used to play with toys, which I think would have been better because it engages you. Now, I'm not saying that putting a tablet or a screen up for them to watch something is bad. Now, obviously, it's useful if you need to keep your kid distracted. Or if you're a single parent, you need to buy food, you need your kid to be distracted and not running around, and you don't want your kid to be rowdy, you need to keep them entertained. There's a multitude of reasons. Now, is that bad about the screen time and all those things? No, that's not bad, but you probably need to regulate the screen time for them. And obviously, the other thing is that I have had friends, who are teachers, and they are even telling me, not one or two, many of them have the same experience. Many of my friends who are teachers, all right, who have even said that it's simply very challenging to teach today's generation because it's not just about what they watch on the television, but it's also the fact that the parents are also very particular about everything. Right, the parents just hand off the kid to the school, and they're like, oh, it's the school's problem now. After school, what happens? Oh, there's the parents here are really getting to the point they're quite hands off. Hands off meaning that you throw your child to someone else, and you run the whole show. You take care of them, you feed them. You basically, it's like a child care, but your kid's already grown up beyond kindergarten and infant care, and they moved on to primary or elementary school, and people are taking care of your kids for you. So in terms of what the minister Indrani is saying, government support, well, that only goes so far before it simply says stop, because realistically all of this is going to cost more. The one thing that I've always observed when you are in Singapore, whenever the government rolls out some kind of support program, let's be honest, dollars and cents again, folks. Where's the dollars and cents going to come? It's going to come from your tax dollars. And that income tax or the taxation is going to go up. Things don't just simply, it's going to stay the same. No, it does not. It will go up. And the fact of the matter remains is that as much as it is, if they, which is the government, want to have more, increased fertility rate, it's not just about support programs. It's not just about saying, oh, you know what, we're going to educate about more people. I've seen those educational videos about kids on the YouTube here, and I do laugh at them because I personally think that having children is a commitment, a lifelong commitment. It's not something you take lightly, and it's not something you just simply say, oh, it's easy. I just do this, I just take care of, it's something that you need to consider very, very carefully about when it comes to children. And the sad part of it is that I find that many government or politicians are just very cavalier to say, oh, we'll put these programs in. But also in the background of the minister herself, unfortunately, I would say that she probably needs to understand marriage life as well. It's not even just simply saying that you need to be married to understand. You will need to understand, because when you're married, then you understand daily hassles of life, the challenges. And it's not just about people who may not have children. For those of you who have done caregiving, like myself, I've done caregiving for 3 generations, of people. two of which have already passed. Two of them, the other 2 are still living. So I've actually been doing a lot of caregiving in the past already. So I know the challenges of caregiving. I know the challenges of the financial aspects of caregiving as well. Be it an elderly or a kid. Yes. So the key part of it, especially when I take care of my nephew, just to be fair, I've taken care of my nephew, I've changed diapers, and brought him out. And I would say the other thing that the minister was talking about was, they would like to encourage workplaces to be more inclusive and be more conducive environments for parents to focus on childbearing and all these things. Be that as it may, I'll tell you the corporate mentality. Here in Singapore, for those of you who are trying to understand, for the longest time, it's always about KPIs. KPIs being number one, income It's about dollars and cents, the money that's coming in. Children and all these things, they're just the narrative is it's a privilege. If I for example, as an employer giving you certain like parental leaves, parental offs, or marriage leave or childcare leave and all these things to the employer, right? For those of you who are not living in Singapore or are intending to work in Singapore, the perspective from the employer is that it's a privilege, it's not an entitlement. Okay? So what's the difference between that? Entitlement is something that you feel that you should be getting. A privilege is something that it's like more like a bonus that's been given from from a from an entity with authority. So they feel that it's a privilege that they're giving you this as well. When employers come around with this mentality that it's a privilege, is not an entitlement and all this thing, nothing's gonna change. All right, nothing's gonna change. Even if you do tell them you should do this, we encourage that. Encouraging is not making changes. It's a step, yes, but it's not a step that actually, that actually pushes for change. Especially when you have economics, that are so fast paced in Singapore. The expenditure of everything's so expensive. You got your inflation that's so high. And I think I talked about how, like certain actually most groceries now have gone up in pricing. So obviously, you're going to be dealing with a lot of challenges when it comes to dollars and cents. So as much as the Singapore government, as well as the minister talks about, all these programs, re-education about this and that, you don't fix if you all right, let's be also tactful and mindful. Then you might ask, what's the proper solution then? The first thing is to allow people to do it as it be. You don't have to push messages, you don't have to flash fertility, have children, have how nice parenthood is, in the faces of your taxpayers or your citizens. They don't need you to tell them that you must have children, you should have children, it is your national duty. There is no national duty when it comes to children, because if you don't raise good children, if you don't foster a good environment for children, you're not going to get what you're looking for. When I say the your means the government, okay? Simultaneously for parents as well, you want to foster a good environment for your children, an environment that's healthy, that's also conducive, warm, safe, So ultimately, you need to consider that giving them the parents' opportunity to decide when is a good time to have children. I understand all about the biology of parents, okay, of mothers and all this thing, all right? So let's be fair about it. I read about it. I know the biological clock is ticking, all right? But in truth, right, I've seen people whom some shouldn't be parents because of the one word I say, attitude. Okay, let me just repeat that, attitude. If your attitude across the board is just nasty and bad, right, you will raise someone that is nasty and bad, because like father like son, like mother like daughter, right? Or the other way around, like mother like son, or like father like daughter. So how you raise your children is going to impact everything along the line. Whether you create angels or you create demons or monsters, it's up to you, right? So the other thing I would like to talk about is childhood, which I previously mentioned about childhood. The environment in Singapore, yes, when you talk about childhood, from my perspective, I hated when we were growing up. We were always fed with this, you have to be number one, you have to be the best, There's a very Asian mentality. I say Asian, okay? I'm referring to Chinese, yeah? Chinese people. Now I know there's Indians and there's Malays, and maybe there's other Asian groups as well, but the main part I can reflect upon on on earnest and in honesty, is that the Chinese Singaporean aspect was always you can't be artists, you can't be musicians, you got to be doctors, you got to be lawyers. If you're not doctors, you're not lawyers, you're nothing. Sorry, young parents and kids, if you're listening to this, but the truth is that yes, if you don't do this, you will be nothing. You will get nothing. I'm just adjusting my vehicle so I don't block people. So that's the truth about it. And the thing is that all of us, we're just really just simply trying to survive. And so you, even as young parents, you need to consider what are the key things. I've got a very enlightened driver who just suddenly swerved into my lane. Oh well. Onwards. And so, childhood-wise, all right. And we always felt that we always had to be. When I grew up, we had this labeling in school. EM1, EM2, EM3. For those of you Singaporeans who were growing up, you're in my era from like 1990 something, and you were going up 1990, early 1990s, and if you're growing up, you heard about EM1, EM2, EM3, you know what I'm talking about. I loathe this labeling, okay, of children's intelligence, and say, oh, EM1 basically meant you were like the top, but you're not the top yet because there's one more layer. It's called the gifted, okay? So the gifted, and then you have EM1, which is like express stream, which is pretty good. Then you have the EM2s, which are like the average, in between. Then you have EM3, which is basically you suck at academics. You're below average. So I didn't like this whole labeling thing at all. Now, of course, people say, yeah, it helps you identify. Yes, it helps you identify the child's educational level, but it creates a very, very negative stigma on the child's upbringing, especially when it comes to academics, especially when you're in an environment with other children. And kids do compare, parents do compare. It's not comparing like with like, taking two kids from different social economic backgrounds and comparing them and then saying that, oh, you should be like this, you should be like that. Why is this kid getting better grades than you? You should score like that, and you should score that. There's so much. There's a lot of comparisons and all this, which I personally find is very toxic. When I say, yes, I use the word toxic because it's very negative, it's very toxic. It's the same as when your child's not fully developed or they haven't found their passions in life, and you tell them, no, you shouldn't be this, you should be this and that. Yes, the parents may be looking out for the future, but at the end of the day, you need to understand that you need to help the kid foster the growth. So in terms of fertility, I can tell you, dear parents, take care of your own health first, get in the right frame of mind, get the right frame of attitudes before you talk about parenthood. And of course, if your life is stressful as it is, and you're very tired and you're working 2 jobs and anything when you have children, they are at a burden. Let's be realistic. We're not trying to be delusional or fantasists. You will have those challenges. Finances, less rest, and work-life balance will come into play. So do taking it into consideration what I'm saying, guys. And I hope to see you all next time. Stay healthy, stay happy. Now, don't, for my friends and folks in Singapore, don't be stressed out by the local mentalities or the government's policies. You should decide whether you want to feel comfortable or at ease having children. It should not be something that is forced upon you guys, make you guys feel stressed about it as well. Right, this is Y2K signing off. Take good care and see you all soon again.